My name is Captain Amelia Rhodes, and at 35 years old, I thought I had seen enough danger for one lifetime. After 12 years in the Army, deployments overseas, and countless moments when life balanced on a razor's edge, I believed I had grown used to hardship. But nothing in combat compared to waking up in a hospital bed, bones broken, body stitched together, and realizing that the one person who should have been at my side was nowhere to be found. The first thing I remember was the sterile smell, that sharp antiseptic tang, mixed with the faint hum of machinery. My eyelids felt like sandbags as I tried to lift them, my chest burning with every shallow breath. The steady beep of a monitor was the only rhythm in the room. When my vision finally cleared, I saw a woman in blue scrubs leaning over me. Her badge read Nurse Kelly Simmons, RN. "You're safe," she said softly, adjusting an IV line. "You've been unconscious for almost 3 days. Try not to move." 3 days. Her words sliced through the fog in my brain. I struggled to speak, my throat raw. "What happened?" "You were in a serious accident on Highway 87, she explained. "A semi-truck jackknifed in the rain. Your car was crushed on the driver's side. Honestly, it's a miracle you survived." I tried to lift my right arm, only to feel a stabbing pain shoot through my ribs. I gasped and collapsed back against the pillow. The nurse pressed a button, easing pain medication into my system. "You'll be all right," she reassured me, but her eyes betrayed the truth. My body was a wreck. Broken ribs, bruised lungs, a fractured leg secured in a heavy cast. I was alive, but barely. Through the haze, one thought pushed its way to the front of my mind. "My husband," I croaked. "Michael, does he know I'm here?" Nurse Simmons hesitated just a fraction of a second, but I caught it. "We called the emergency contact listed in your phone," she said carefully. "Left messages. No one has come yet, but I'm sure he will." The words rang hollow. Michael always answered my calls. In combat zones, across oceans, even during his late-night gigs at smoky bars, he always picked up. Why not now, when I needed him most? My mind scrambled to piece together the last memory before the darkness. I remembered leaving my attorney's office, my hands trembling after signing papers that named me the heir to my uncle Jonathan Pierce's estate. $11 million. The figure still didn't feel real. I had driven away in a daze, rehearsing how I would tell Michael. I even stopped to buy him a gift, something symbolic of the new beginning this inheritance could give us. Then headlights, the screech of tires, a deafening crash, and nothing. Now I lay broken, staring at the ceiling tiles, wondering why the man I called my husband hadn't walked through that door. Something deep in my gut whispered that the accident wasn't the only disaster I would have to survive. Lying in that hospital bed, I kept replaying the days leading up to the accident, as if combing through the past would explain why I was here alone. My thoughts circled back to Uncle Jonathan, the man I had barely known as a child, yet who had somehow seen me more clearly than my own father ever did. Jonathan Pierce had been my father's older brother. They were both Army men, but where my father settled into civilian life after his service, Jonathan became a legend. Decorated in combat, then turning his discipline into building a sprawling ranch in Colorado, he lived by a code that made him both respected and feared. He never married, never had children. His entire life was the land, the horses, and the pride of a soldier who never really left the battlefield behind. My relationship with him was complicated. My father cut ties with Jonathan decades ago, a feud so bitter no one in the family even mentioned his name. But as a little girl, I remembered visiting his ranch once or twice, running across open fields while he stood tall and quiet, watching like a sentinel. He wasn't warm exactly, but his presence made me feel safe. I hadn't seen him in years until last winter, when I received a call from a cousin I barely knew. Jonathan was in the hospital with advanced heart disease. Something inside me couldn't ignore it. I wore my uniform when I walked into his room, and when he saw me, his eyes lit up with a pride that caught me off guard. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," he whispered, his voice raspy. Strong, stubborn, and unwilling to bow to anyone. That visit became a routine. Every week after drills, I would sit with him. We talked about leadership, sacrifice, the scars we carried. He asked about my deployments, my soldiers, the loneliness of service. We never spoke about my father. It was as if we silently agreed that the old feud no longer mattered. 3 months later, Jonathan passed away quietly in his sleep. I attended his funeral in uniform, standing apart from the rest of the family, who barely acknowledged me. I thought that was the end of it until I received the call from his attorney, Daniel Ross. When I stepped into Daniel's office, I expected nothing more than a letter, or maybe a small keepsake. But when he slid the will across the polished desk, my breath caught. Uncle Jonathan had left me everything. His ranch, his assets, his accounts, $11 million in total. He rewrote his will shortly after your visits began, Daniel explained. He said you carried the spirit he wanted his legacy to live through. He trusted you. Tears stung my eyes as I read Jonathan's final letter. This money is a tool, not a solution, it said in his steady handwriting. Use it wisely, serve with honor, and remember that true wealth is not in dollars, but in what you build with them. I walked out of that office trembling, the enormity of the responsibility pressing down on me. $11 million could change everything. I imagined paying off debts, creating a foundation for injured veterans, finally giving Michael the stability he always craved. On impulse, I stopped at a jewelry store and bought him a watch. Sleek, expensive, a symbol of our new beginning. Driving home, rain tapped against the windshield, the roads slick and gleaming under the late afternoon light. My heart was full of nervous excitement as I rehearsed how to tell him. Maybe I'd ask him to close his eyes, place the watch in his hand, and then tell him we were free. Financially, emotionally, finally free. I never saw the semi-truck until it was too late. Tires screeched, metal tore like paper, and my last thought before the world went black was that life had just handed me both a gift and a curse at the same time. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive, but in those first days, I didn't feel lucky at all. My body was broken in more places than I could count. 3 ribs fractured, a leg pinned with steel rods, a concussion that left me dizzy if I even turned my head. I couldn't sit up without help, couldn't walk, couldn't breathe deeply without pain lancing through my chest. Survival felt more like punishment. What cut deeper than the injuries was the silence. Michael still hadn't come. Nurse Kelly would check my phone for me, holding it carefully since I couldn't move my arm well. I asked her over and over, "Any messages?" She would glance down, shake her head, and give me that polite nurse's smile that tried to hide pity. I dialed his number myself one evening, my hand trembling so badly I nearly dropped the phone. It rang once, twice, then went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice cracking. "Michael, it's me. I'm alive. I need you." I called again an hour later. No answer. The next morning, the same. By the third day, my calls went directly to voicemail every time, as if he had blocked me. Friends from my unit came in shifts, their uniforms still smelling faintly of the motor pool. They told jokes, brought me coffee, reminded me I wasn't alone. But when I asked about Michael, their faces tightened. Finally, one of them, Sergeant Miller, muttered, "He's around, but not the way you'd expect." When I pressed him, he just shrugged. "Rest, ma'am. Focus on healing." That only sharpened the suspicion gnawing in my gut. Later that night, when Nurse Kelly brought her tablet to check my chart, I asked quietly, "Can you pull up social media for me? I need to see something." She hesitated, but finally handed it over. I opened Michael's page. My hands went cold. There he was, smiling, a champagne glass raised high, in a photo tagged at the Dallas Skyline Lounge. The caption read, "Celebrating New Beginnings." The post was less than 24 hours old. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. New beginnings. While I lay in a hospital bed, broken and bleeding, my husband was out toasting a new life. When my phone buzzed that night, I snatched it up so fast I nearly pulled my IV loose. A text from Michael. Relief surged, only to evaporate as I read the words. Heard about accident. Busy with breakthrough project. Will visit when things calm down. No questions about my injuries. No I love you, just cold dismissal. Nurse Kelly looked over my shoulder at the message, then at me. "That doesn't sound right," she said softly. I nodded, but my throat had closed too tightly to answer. I had stared death in the face on that highway, but this was a different kind of death. The death of trust, the unraveling of a marriage I thought was unbreakable. And deep down I knew, the silence was not neglect. It was a sign. Something darker was waiting, just beyond the edges of my broken body's pain. By the end of my first week in the hospital, the silence from Michael had hollowed me out. Each day the nurses changed my bandages, the doctors checked my vitals, and friends in uniform dropped by to keep my spirits afloat. But the man I had built my life with, my husband, remained a ghost. On the seventh day, I finally had a visitor who was not in uniform or a white coat. Clara, my closest friend since our academy days, walked into my room carrying a small bouquet of lilies. Her eyes darted everywhere but at me. She looked as if she had been crying for days. "You look strong," she said awkwardly, setting the flowers on the side table. I narrowed my eyes. "Clara, what's going on? You've been avoiding me. I can hear it in your voice every time I call." She sat down heavily in the visitor's chair, twisting her fingers together until her knuckles turned white. "I didn't know how to tell you," she whispered. "Everything is so twisted right now." My pulse quickened, the monitor at my bedside betraying my rising anxiety. "Tell me what?" She drew a long breath, then dropped the words like stones. "Michael told people you died in the crash." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What do you mean? Died?" Clara's eyes filled with tears. "He held a little memorial at your apartment last week, invited people from his music circle. He said he was devastated, that you didn't survive." My body went cold, the pain in my ribs suddenly eclipsed by the sheer disbelief. "But I'm here. I'm alive. How could he—" "There's more," she cut in, her voice trembling. "He's with someone else now. Her name is Sofia Marquez. She works at a gallery downtown. They've been close for a while." I shook my head violently, ignoring the stabbing pain that followed. "No, that's impossible. We're married." "He wouldn't—" Clara pulled her phone from her bag, her hands shaking as she scrolled. Then she turned the screen toward me. There, in vivid color, was Michael. His arm draped around a young woman with long dark hair, both of them smiling beneath glowing chandeliers. Champagne glasses clinked, the caption beneath the photo, "To new beginnings." My stomach turned. The woman was stylish, poised, and disturbingly familiar. Not in the sense that I had met her before, but because her features echoed mine. Same dark eyes, same sharp cheekbones. It was like staring at a younger version of myself. Clara swallowed hard. "People are saying they married last weekend. Quick courthouse ceremony." The room spun. I gripped the bed rail, gasping, "Married." While I lay broken, fighting for my life, my husband had already declared me dead and started a new one with someone else. Nurse Kelly burst in at the sound of my alarmed breathing, adjusting the oxygen line as the monitor spiked. Clara stood, tears spilling freely. "I'm sorry, Amelia. I should have told you sooner." I looked down at the photo still glowing on the phone screen, Sophia's smile frozen in time. Something deep inside me whispered that this resemblance was no coincidence. There was more to her than Michael wanted me to know. And for the first time since the crash, I felt a spark of rage cutting through the fog of pain. After Clara's visit, I could no longer dismiss the gnawing dread inside me. The evidence was right there. Michael had told the world I was gone, remarried a stranger who looked unsettlingly like me, and celebrated my absence with champagne. Grief turned into a sharp, steady anger. That night, I called Daniel Ross, my uncle's attorney. His voice on the line was crisp, professional, but I could hear unease underneath. "Captain Rhodes, I've been trying to reach you," he said. "Your husband came to my office 2 days ago. He claimed to be your next of kin and presented paperwork, death certificates, marriage records, even a woman he introduced as your cousin, arguing she was entitled to part of your inheritance." I felt my blood run cold. "And you?" I refused. The documents were sloppy forgeries, and his story fell apart the moment I pressed. But Amelia, he's not going to stop. He's already circling like a vulture. For a moment, I couldn't speak. It was one thing for Michael to betray me personally. It was another for him to plot to erase me on paper. Daniel's voice hardened. We need to take precautions. If he thinks you're still incapacitated, or worse, he might try to force control over your estate. I stared at the IV in my arm, the cast weighing down my leg. He was right. Physically, I was weak, but I still had my mind, my training, and a fury that had survived battlefields. Then let's set a trap, I said. The plan came together quickly. Nurse Kelly helped discreetly install a small camera in the corner of my hospital room, angled toward the bed. Daniel agreed to wait nearby during visiting hours. Clara, still shaken but determined, volunteered her phone. Use my number, she said. He doesn't know I've spoken to you. If we send a message, he'll think it's from me. I typed slowly with trembling hands. She remembers everything. Fix this before it's too late. The reply came in less than 2 minutes. We'll handle it today. Delete this message. I exhaled, my body shivering despite the warmth of the room. He was coming. The morning passed in a haze of anticipation. Kelly adjusted my pillows, brushed my hair so I would look weaker than I was, and whispered, You're not alone in this. Daniel arrived at noon, briefcase in hand, his jaw set. He positioned himself by the window, out of sight from the door. The red light on the hidden camera blinked once before steadying, recording. At 1:59 p.m., my heart monitor beeped faster, betraying my nerves. The knock came sharp and decisive. Michael was here. The door creaked open, and in walked Michael. I almost didn't recognize him. The man who once painted canvases late into the night with messy hair and paint-stained hands now stood in an expensive blazer, his hair slicked back, a gold watch glinting under the fluorescent light. He looked polished, confident, like someone who had already shed his old life. For a fleeting second, I expected relief or shame to flicker across his face when he saw me. Instead, I saw annoyance, quickly masked by a performance of concern. Amelia, he said, his voice a little too smooth. You're awake. We've been so worried. We? I asked quietly. He gestured toward the door. A slender woman stepped in, dark hair cascading over her shoulders, her designer dress too fine for a hospital room. Sophia Marquez. She lingered close to the doorway, her hands clasped tightly together. Michael moved closer to my bed, his expression carefully rehearsed. The doctors told me your memory might be patchy after the accident. A lot has happened. I thought I lost you. I steadied my breathing, clenching the blanket. You told people I was dead. He faltered just for a second, then recovered. A misunderstanding. When they first brought you in, they weren't sure you'd survive. I was devastated. Some people must have assumed the worst. Some people, I repeated, my voice icy. Or you. He pulled a set of papers from his inner pocket, placing them neatly on the tray by my bed. These are just temporary authorizations, sweetheart, to let me manage your finances while you recover. Stress could slow your healing. Let me handle things for you. I almost laughed. The audacity. You mean the $11 million I inherited? I asked flatly. For the first time, his mask cracked. His jaw tightened before he forced a smile. Of course. That money is a blessing, but also a responsibility. I only want to help. From the corner of the room, Daniel Ross rose from his chair, his voice calm but firm. Interesting, because last week you tried to claim that inheritance as Amelia's next of kin, using forged death certificates. Would you like me to show you the video footage? Michael spun around, startled. Who the hell are you? Her attorney, Daniel replied, setting his tablet on the tray and pressing play. The sound of Michael's own voice filled the room, him presenting falsified papers in Daniel's office, Sophia standing silently beside him. Michael lunged for the device, but Nurse Kelly stepped forward, her voice sharp. Don't touch it. Security is right outside. And then it happened. Sophia, who had been quiet until now, moved closer. She looked at me, really looked, and froze. her face drained of color, her eyes wide. She reached into her purse with trembling fingers and pulled out a worn photograph. The air in the room thickened as she held it out. A teenage girl, barely 18, cradling a newborn, tears streaking her cheeks. My own face stared back at me from another lifetime. Sophia's lips parted, her voice breaking. "Oh my God, she's my mother!" The monitor beside me spiked wildly, matching the shock that ripped through my body. Michael grabbed her arm, hissing, "Shut up! Stick to the plan!" But Sophia pulled away, her eyes locked on mine. "I've been searching for you my whole life," she whispered. The room tilted, memories flooding. Hidden years, a secret adoption, a baby I was forced to give up before I left for basic training. 17 years of silence crashing back in a single, devastating revelation. And as Michael's carefully woven lies unraveled in front of him, I realized the betrayal went deeper than I had ever imagined. For a long moment, the room was nothing but silence and the ragged sound of my own breathing. Sophia stood at the foot of my bed, clutching the photograph as if it tethered her to the truth. Michael's mask of control shattered completely. His eyes darted toward the door, calculating escape, but Daniel's calm voice cut through the tension. "Hospital security is waiting outside," he said evenly. "You leave now. It only adds fleeing to the charges." Michael's face twisted, desperation leaking through his arrogance. "This is absurd. You're letting her manipulate you," he snapped, pointing at Sophia. "She doesn't know what she's saying." But Sophia's voice rang clear. "I know exactly what I'm saying. You used me. You told me lies about my mother, made me believe you cared, when all you wanted was her inheritance." Michael lunged toward her, but 2 security officers burst in, pinning him back. He thrashed, shouting curses, but the fight was gone from his eyes. They hauled him away in handcuffs, leaving the room vibrating with the aftershock of everything that had just come crashing down. I looked at Sophia, really seeing her now, the sharp cheekbones we shared, the determination in her gaze. "I never stopped thinking about you," I whispered, my throat tight. "Not a single day." Tears spilled down her cheeks. She crossed the room slowly, as if afraid I might vanish if she moved too fast. Then she set the photograph gently in my hands. "I carried this my whole life," she said. "The only piece of you I had." For the first time since the accident, I wept openly. Not from pain, not from betrayal, but from the raw ache of 17 years lost and the impossible gift of having her back. Nurse Kelly slipped quietly out of the room, leaving us alone. The days that followed blurred into police statements, meetings with Daniel, and the relentless work of physical therapy. Michael faced charges of fraud, forgery, bigamy, and attempted grand theft. The weight of evidence was crushing. Documents, recordings, and Sophia's testimony. Meanwhile, Sophia began visiting daily. At first, we were cautious, circling each other with questions half-asked and emotions half-hidden. But slowly, walls came down. She told me about her adoptive parents, kind, steady people who had raised her with love. She told me she always wondered who her birth mother was, but never imagined finding her this way. One afternoon, as she helped me practice standing with crutches, she looked at me with shy determination. "I quit my job at the gallery. Too many memories. I want to go back to school, study psychology, maybe help other families like ours." I smiled, my chest swelling with pride. "Then we'll make sure you have everything you need." For the first time since the crash, I felt the faint stirrings of hope. Out of betrayal and pain, something new was taking root, a bond that even Michael's lies couldn't destroy. 6 weeks after the crash, I was discharged from the hospital. I left in a wheelchair, my legs still pinned and braced, but with something stronger holding me up, the fierce will to rebuild. Sophia walked beside me, carrying my bag. The weight of 17 years between us slowly giving way to a fragile but growing trust. We didn't return to the apartment Michael and I once shared. That place was poisoned by lies. Instead, Daniel arranged for me to move into my Uncle Jonathan's ranch, the estate that had sparked all of this. When we pulled up the long gravel drive, the mountains in the distance capped with snow, I felt a strange mix of grief and renewal. It was as if Jonathan had known that one day this house would become a sanctuary. Not just for me, but for a family I never imagined reclaiming. Adjusting wasn't easy. Physical therapy was brutal, each step with crutches feeling like a battle all over again. Some nights I lay awake, haunted by the crash, by Michael's cold words, by the image of him raising a glass of champagne while I fought for my life. But every time the darkness pressed in, Sophia was there. She cooked simple meals, helped me practice walking across the porch, and filled the house with laughter I hadn't heard in years. The trial came months later. Michael sat across the courtroom in an orange jumpsuit, stripped of the charm that once fooled me. The charges stacked high: fraud, forgery, bigamy, conspiracy to commit theft. When the judge read the sentence, 8 years in federal prison, he barely flinched. I, on the other hand, felt the weight slide off my shoulders. Not triumph, not vengeance, just relief. After the hearing, Sophia squeezed my hand. "Do you still love him?" she asked quietly. I thought carefully before answering. No, I mourn the person I thought he was, but that person never really existed. Seasons changed at the ranch. Spring brought green shoots and new life to the fields. Together, Sophia and I planted a small garden, our hands working side by side in the soil. She enrolled in university that fall, determined to study psychology and help other adoptees. I began writing, at first just journal entries, then longer essays, until eventually my story took the shape of a book. 1 year to the day after the accident, we gathered on the ranch porch. Daniel, Nurse Kelly, friends from my unit, even Sophia's adoptive parents. They all came. We raised glasses, not of champagne, but of iced tea and coffee, simple and honest. I stood, leaning on my cane, and said, "To unexpected journeys, to finding light after the darkest nights, to family, both the ones we're born into and the ones we choose." As dusk settled, Sophia sat beside me on the porch steps. "Do you ever regret it? The accident? The betrayal? Everything?" I looked at her, at the daughter I thought I had lost forever, and shook my head. "No, because it brought me back to you." And in that moment, I understood what Uncle Jonathan meant in his letter. True wealth isn't measured in millions. It's in the bonds we forge when everything else is stripped away.